Hey, here we go. We are live, and it's the 1 o'clock hour, and we have another amazing wrestling mind and coach and wrestler in our country. He's Coach Buck Watkins. He's the head coach at Frazier High School in PA. He's also the owner coach of Watkins Trained. He was a 4-year starter at Seton Hill. He's also a coach on the wrestling mindset. So he can do. He's a multitasker of a lot. So, hey, Coach Watkins, thanks so much for coming on, man. I'm absolutely honored to have you, and I'm hoping it's cooler in Pennsylvania because it's about 105 down here.
I thank you for the opportunity to be on your show. And yeah, it's a little bit cooler, but I've had to stay inside a little bit. I was wrestling the other day with some kids just goofing around, and I took a shot to the head with a knee, and I also I haven't been feeling the best of playing around, so I've been staying inside. But one thing I do miss about Florida is it rains every day.
You get the that cool off, right?
Oh, most definitely.
Yeah, it's been it's definitely we get some better days, but for the most part, we're just here steamy in the summer. But I know that I think we've all been through this pandemic. It seems like Florida right now is getting hit worse than most. Um, but it looks like people are starting to get open again. But also, you know, I know that with Watkins Trained, your other job besides coaching at Frazier, Watkins Trained is a big part of who you are in your life during the off season. Last year you did 35 camps covering 40,000 miles. So obviously, first, let us know about Watkins Trained, but also how has this kind of affected you, and how have you kept your Watkins Trained kids kind of focused?
Um, so it's been a unique experience for me. It's been a learning experience. One thing that I talk about in my wrestling camps is about wanting to get better and willing to do whatever it takes. One thing that I think about when I get into my wrestling camps is what do I want to impart into these kids that will take with them for the rest of their life. And I always use that slogan, whatever it takes. So with not countries, but states opening up here, I'll be able to do a little bit of traveling, little smaller groups. There's I've been traveling smaller little places here and there. Pennsylvania's been opening up a little bit, and I've gone to a club or two practice just to get back on the mat. It's it's been a learning experience, and been a learning experience for all of us. I think as coaches across the country, especially at the college level, they're having to adapt with recruiting and not being having guys on campus to wrestle.
Yeah, it seems. I know you said Pennsylvania is opening up a little bit, and you kind of traveled around a little bit. What are you seeing different that clubs are doing that you didn't see done before to kind of adapt to the new situation?
So there's actually I just saw on Twitter the other day, there's a new like type of sprinkler system that's being put in wrestling rooms. Like it goes off every so often and it dries quickly. Like it's on a timer and it just sprays down and it covers the walls and the mats and it dries up quickly. I just saw that on Twitter. I don't know exactly what company came up with that, but I did notice that other clubs in Pennsylvania are starting to buy them as well. So that's something that maybe teams in Florida will want to look into, and as well as others across the country. I thought it was a pretty neat tool. It gets away from the old bucket and mop and where's the kid with the longest arms because he'll be able to do it the quickest.
Yeah,
So
I think I saw that on I think someone posted like a video from the New Way tournament or something where they walked under something and it sprayed them as they were coming in or something like that.
yeah, but just recently there's a high school up here, Kiski area high school, and they put it kind of looks like a sprinkler system, I guess you'd say, and it sprays the disinfectant all over the walls and all over the mats. And I think the compound club here in Pennsylvania uses a well at one of their locations. It's pretty neat. It sprays everything.
Wow. Yeah. Well, I hope that people jump on it, and obviously it does wonders for everyone. Well, I'm glad to see that Watkins trained is starting to get the wheels rolling again, and getting out to at least locally stuff. I'm sure I mean, seeing what you did last summer, you've got to be somebody that doesn't like being inside very often. So traveling probably keeps you sane.
No, it's all about the life experiences for me. I always live by a quote, live a life worth living. And, I'm only here, you're only here for a short time. So you might as well make the most of it. And like I said, what do you want to impart into these kids when you meet them? You want something that sticks with them for the rest of their life. And sometimes not every kid that you go to in camp wants to wrestle in college. So you have to, put things that they're going to carry on with them for the rest of their life. That's why I always, even at Frazier High School, I always talk about being disciplined and developing leadership skills. I think those are things that we sometimes lack in the sport of wrestling is discipline and leadership skills. Obviously not at the highest level, but where I'm at, there's a lot of, not a whole lot of discipline. But with this COVID-19, you're seeing who's been disciplined over the months off, who's been finding ways to get creative and training. I think that's one thing too that I noticed, watching a couple practices. There's been kids, been studying film, trying out new moves, trying out things I've never seen before. So the creativity has really grown because just think about this. A lot of people went out and bought mats, they put them in their little garages. So they spent all that time during the day after the kids got done, doing schoolwork in the morning or whatever time they got done. And you could take that time and focus on the small little details or say, hey, look, I want to try this. And you have all the time in the world. And then, there's the other half that was like, I'll just wait until it opens. And
Yeah, I
now
know
they're getting passed up.
I know my boys have a little mat out back that they roll up and put down. It's one of those, like, little click togethers, whatever. It's like three of them, and they'll get out and roll around. But like you said, we'll jump in the pool, and they'll be trying stuff that they saw on like videotapes and stuff. Like there's been this cool video going around where uh, they do like an arm throw, not an arm throw, but what do they call it? Where you're hooked, but then you pull them forward, but then you hit like a back trip or something. You've seen the video going around a lot. So now I see the kids out there um, practicing it. So yeah, I think my kids have really more been like working on weight training because my 14-year-old has kind of hit that kind of puberty stage where he's getting stronger. So he really needs to hit the weight. So he's been doing that mostly during the quarantine. But like I told him, just do something every day, and when this passes, you'll get back into it. You're still young. He's in ninth. He just finished ninth grade, so um, luckily it happened on the early end of his career.
Yeah, yeah, you definitely feel bad for the people who it happened on the end of their towards the end of their states that canceled their state tournament, obviously, and never got a chance to put their foot in line or went on to make history. And that's something that's difficult to live with. There's two things that hinder people from reaching their potential. It's the fear of failure and the pain of regret. And I think that there's a lot of people right now walking around with that pain of regret. And I always talk to that at each of my campers and going to Frazier Wrestling. The pain of regret's real. It's the hardest thing in the world to overcome. And I always tell them, I think any wrestling coach probably sits there and says, if I could go back and do it over again, I would in a heartbeat. There's no doubt about it. Even yourself would go back and do it again in a heartbeat, and you do things way different. But you just try to do what's best for the kids at this point. That's why I always say it's always, what are you passing on to the kids in your wrestling program, or what are you passing on to the kids at camp? Because not every kid on my wrestling team wants to wrestle in college. Not every kid that comes to camp wants to be a world champion. Not every kid has those, has those desires to do that. And you have to keep it entertaining. You have to keep it fun, but you also have to, teach them things that they'll carry on for the rest of their life. And I think that's the most important part.
Yeah,
And
it's
and
awesome.
and
Go
and
ahead.
for me, I go to a lot of small towns. So that's kind of my like niche forte, I guess, because I'm from a small town here in Pennsylvania and I coach at a small town high school. And I kind of root for the small colleges at D1 level. I'm a huge Northern Iowa fan. I think those guys are just, blue collar hard workers. I also, there's a, I love all college wrestling, but there's just certain people you kind of look at and you're like, and University of Northern Iowa being a small D1 and they're producing a national champ and, being at a high school at Frazier, we just started high school wrestling 4 years ago. And, we want to, I always tell my guys, and I try to tell this to the parents, I want the school to be the standard for small town wrestling. Like I want somebody to come in and say, what is the blueprint here? Why does this work so well?
And yeah, I mean, and it seems like talking to a lot of PA, I've started, I'm based in Florida. So at first it was all about Florida and it's still, it still is a lot about, hey, look, Florida's here, but it's kind of blossomed to where I'm getting coaches on from around the country. So we're getting to really get to meet some of these schools like yourself. And I'm hoping that, next thing you know, maybe there's a Florida coach that calls Buck Watkins and says, hey, can I bring my team up to Watkins trained in Frazier and you guys can kind of do your thing. Andrew Guglielmo, Googs, get back. What's up, buddy? He says, love you, Buck. Such a hard worker. Mafia learned a ton from you.
Excellent coach. They have a very prestigious program down there. I don't think that they've reached their full potential. I think I'll be honest with you, there's a lot of there's a lot of potential that in the state of Florida, just going around and watching the wrestling. And I think that Florida wrestling's really changed with the growing of Lake Highland Prep. Has really put Florida on the map. I understand that there's a lot of people who say things about the program, whatever, but you know what? That guy wins. He's a winner. Not everybody loves a winner. That's just bottom line. And if I'm a good kid and I want to wrestle the best competition, and you're a dad, and I'm a wrestling dad, and I want my kid to wrestle the best kids in the country, where are you going to send them? That's what a program. That's just like when you're going out and you're looking at colleges. I want my kid to be the best wrestler in the country. What school is wrestling the best competition? Obviously, the competition is pretty equal, and as far as college wrestling, but when you look at the schedule that Lake Highland Prep brings to the table, it goes alongside with any high school in the country. And I think that's something to be said. I think that's truly incredible.
Yeah, and and you're starting to see Goog with Manatee head all over the country. We just saw Manatee Mafia in over at Morris down in Georgia, and he's been with you. And yeah, and also Lake Highland Prep, like you said, they've got the CFWA. I know my son is part of the club, and he's really blossomed from it, and from getting to meet all the great clubs around the state and the country. A lot of good people. But yeah, you're right. I mean, if people, unfortunately, they don't want to see people win, right? Or some people that happen. So, I think for the most part, there's more good people in wrestling than there is in any other sport. And I think that's what made me fall in love with it and start this show. But yeah, I agree with you. Talk about like you're a wrestling mindset coach. I've seen the program now. I've gotten involved with this show thing. So I've seen the mindset come up and people have said, hey, reach out to somebody with mindset. I searched and I found you. I reached out to you. I'm glad I did because here you are, right? And I'd love to know how you got involved with it. Talk about it. How can people, get involved with the program? But also, I was reading an article that you wrote, and speaking of mindset, there was a couple quotes that stuck out to me in your article, and the first one is, you said, look, the sport is a unique one that offers a team aspect as well as individual accountability. I'm guessing you mean it's like the most individual team sport you can probably do. And then you also said, look, you can't hide in life nor on the wrestling mat. So I think basically with those two, tell me what you were meaning by that, and why kids should really ingest that.
I think that, one thing, first off, I gotta give a shout out to both of my mentors, Gina Jefferson Eddie, who started Wrestling Mindset, which is now turned into Winning Mindset and reaching out to all the different sports. And there's about 25, maybe 30 coaches. I'm not exactly sure. I started with the program about 3 years ago, started working with them. I really got involved with it and I enjoy it every day. One thing about it is wrestling's 90% mental and 10% physical, but we only train, 10% mental, 90% physical. One thing that I see that hinders a lot of people from reaching their potential is the mental capacity. And, I'll go back to this, and this is my example of what could happen when you truly believe in yourself. My first year of going to Frazier Wrestling was that I got there in about January, and I met Thane Lawrence, and we started working out together as a practice partner, and I started being his coach in the corner. And he really blossomed because he started to believe in the process. I got him to believe in, that he could win it. And I'll never forget that next year, he's ranked number 2 in the state. We go to the regional finals and he wrestles the number 1 kid returning state champ. And he gets beat. I mean, not just beat. I mean, he gets beat bad. It's like 10-1. Like there's nothing pretty about it. I don't care what anybody says. And I remember him walking off the mat and he goes back in the corner. And I remember looking at him and there was a guy standing there. I don't know. He must have heard what I said because he kind of giggled. And I said, look, you're going to win this match. I said, in 2 weeks, you're going to win this state title. Because even though he had just gotten beat 10-1, I knew that he didn't wrestle his very best. I knew that he left so much on the table there that he was going to shock the world 2 weeks later. And I remember the guy next, and I remember walking up to he's getting ready to wrestle the state finals against a kid. And the guy came and asked me something, and he goes, oh, how's it going to turn out, Buck? I said, it's going to be a little different story. I said, there was a lot of adjustments made. And so Thane ends up beating that kid 10-1 2 weeks later. And,
Wow, that's awesome.
And the guy was like, yep, adjustments were made. But, he believed in himself. And I think that's one thing that a lot of people don't do enough of. If you knew how powerful a positive mindset was, you'd never have a
Damn, I lost you. You there?
negative thought in your life. That's the power of influence.
Are you there?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay. But do you know what I mean? I mean, if you knew how powerful your mindset was, you never have a negative thought in your life. Everything would always be positive. The power of influence is great, greatly underappreciated, I think.
Yeah, and I think that's people ask me what's the most important thing that you've learned through these 180 shows or 190 shows. And I think the one thing that I've heard from everybody is your mind. I think it's the most talked about thing that has happened on this show, at least from the coaches I've spoken to. It was all mindset. And so I can't disagree with you. And Chuck Morris just said, Buck Watkins, great guy, loves the kids.
So there's a funny story. He has a group of young men that their parents flew me down last year to work out with them. So we're in this small little group. And I told the parents, I said, look, you brought me here. You're going to get your money's worth. Well, after the first day, one of the boys went to the mother came to me and she started laughing. She said, my boy uh, came up to me and said, whatever you paying him, I'll pay him so he doesn't have to come back tomorrow. Um, so, so that's the thing about what I do and what I want to achieve is I want to be different. I think each wrestling camp brings a little something different to the table. Mike Krause brings the heat. Cliff Fretwell, man, scrambles. He's a genius. There's a bunch of other guys that have camps that do very well. Perler has a great system. Rob Waller, All American Wrestling Club, all those guys bring something different to the table. And I think when you're doing camps and you're looking around as a coach or a parent, you got to find, what do you want your kids to learn? What are you trying to get out of it? What do you want them to experience? Do you want them to get a whole lot of matches? Do you want them to get a whole lot of technique? If you're looking for a lot of matches, iron sharpens iron out of Iowa. You can get up as an individual. You can get, like, I don't know, 20 matches in about 3 or 4 days. That's a lot of matches at a wrestling camp. So, it's all about what you want out of it. And I remember going down there into Georgia, and I told those parents, I said, look, this is going to be something that your boys have never experienced before. I said, it'll probably be the hardest thing they ever did. And the funny thing is like I said, it's all about, what do you want to leave? What do you want them to have when you leave? And that's very important there. And, they still talk about it. The boys will message me all the time. Hey, and the one boy, he ended up taking second in state this year, and the other boy is headed to college to wrestle, and there's a lot of potential.
Yeah, Georgia's definitely doing some big things, and I finally had the pleasure of having Coach Morris on the other day, and man, I could have that guy on every morning. That guy's full of energy and brings it, man. It was exciting to talk to him. So I agree with you. Um, there's a couple of names that I know have been very important in your life. You could tell me what they mean to you. Rob Waller, Johnnie Cobb, and Chris Elliott.
I think especially Coach Waller has built my foundation as a wrestling coach. And I say that because I'm always wanting to learn. That's one thing about Coach Waller. He's always brought in a lot of clinicians, always wanting to learn more, always brought in different guys. And he was kind of my foundation of becoming a coach. Johnnie Cobb gave me my first opportunity to be a coach in college as a grad assistant. I learned a lot about handling practices, handling situations. It was my first experience too with women's wrestling, and that man is a pioneer in women's wrestling. I mean, he has done an incredible job with of promoting women's wrestling in the state of Texas. The state of Texas started women's wrestling like in '99 or 2000. So everybody else is behind the 8 ball. And, he's coached girls at the highest level. So if there was a man that I would recommend, if you're wanting to start women's wrestling and wanting to learn a whole lot about it, I suggest getting in contact with him. My next, obviously, Coach Elliott has been a very good mentor to me. The man, gave me an opportunity to wrestle in college. And I've, reached out to him every now and then about certain questions or things that arise. And, each of them played a different part, played an aspect in every part of my life. And, sometimes as you change, as you get older and you change, the people you need around you change. So each time that I was around each and every one of them, I've gotten better. There's been a whole lot of growth. Coach Waller's 70 years old, still getting out on a wrestling mat.
Wow.
That says a lot about, the dedication.
I think it's the blood in Pennsylvania.
Um, That's kind of funny you say that. People ask me that question all the time. What makes Pennsylvania wrestling so great? And I'll tell you this. This helps me tremendously as a wrestling coach. Uh, Within probably 45 minutes of my high school, there's probably about 4 clubs who have national champion caliber coaches. Uh,
Yeah, that's what, when I spoke to the gentleman that has South Hills,
Rob Waller. Yes.
I'm sorry, I thought you stopped, but it was the connection. My apologies. I didn't mean to talk over you.
No, no, it's okay. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think that's what, when I talked to the gentleman, that Coach Mocker, I think you say his last name. He's got South Hills. And then I talked to Coach Headley over at Pitt, and they said the amazing thing about that part of the country that you're in right there, the Pittsburgh area, is that you can walk. Both of them said I can walk into a grocery store at any time during the day, and I could look around and there's 5, 6 All-Americans just grocery shopping that were All-Americans at some point in time in their life here in Pennsylvania. It's like you walk into any gym and there's national champions. You walk down the street and you can see a guy on the corner in his suit getting ready for work that you're like, yo, that guy was a beast.
Yeah, it's a cultural thing. I think that's the biggest difference, and I think that's why the popularity is there with the sport of wrestling here in Pennsylvania is the culture. I think there's a lot of good kids. There's a lot of good kids out west. I think that there's a lot of kids who are passed up because they don't have the same opportunity as a kid does in Pennsylvania. There's a lot of tough kids out west. I travel out west a lot. Wyoming, Idaho, Colorado. And I say that because when I went to Idaho, I worked with this club called Caldwell, and a lot of those kids, they hunt, they fish, they do all these rough things. And the one guy, well, his boy was rode bulls, and so this kid's getting on a wrestling mat. He has absolutely no fear. I mean, if he's hopping on a couple 100-pound animal, he obviously doesn't have a fear of scrapping with a man for 6 minutes. And one thing that I enjoy traveling too is I always learn something from people who do different things. Like when I went to Idaho, I learned about dog hunting, you know, dog hunting bears, because I
Wow.
met this guy. He was really good. He was really good about it. They consider him like the dog whisperer or whatever. And I sat there and I watched, and this guy is fully involved. And like he probably would have been a good wrestler if he the way this guy is with his dogs, he probably, it's just incredible. And I think that's where we miss out on things as coaches as well. I try to part on my kids learning about different trades and things like that and what they can take from them. I Some of the kids on my team love to hunt. So on Instagram, social media, there's all kinds of people who do these things. But there's this guy by the name of Cameron Haynes. He's actually a sponsored athlete for Under Armour. But not only does he bow hunt, this guy runs 25 miles a day, if not more. Like he runs a marathon a day. And it's not because he has to do that to be a hunter. This guy wants to be different. This guy wants to be the best at what he does. Like he always wants to be ready. And every day he's always working out and he's always shooting his bow. And it's all about consistency. So when this guy goes out and hunt and he's got to trek 20 miles to get an elk or something, that don't bother him.
Yeah, because he's ready.
Yeah, and I think that's one thing that kids don't see. They're like, well, what can I learn in wrestling that can apply to life? Well, the consistency that you take from that sport can apply into your job, can apply into your home. Those little things that we sometimes miss out on.
Yeah, it's amazing, and this has been awesome talking with you, man. Just the mindset aspect of it, and listening to you talk. And um, if you guys out there look up Buck Watkins on Google, look him up on social media. There's a lot of good shit out there about him, and he interviews with a lot of folks, and he puts a lot of great quotes out there that you can put on your quote board. And then, of course, he's one of many coaches that are involved in Wrestling Mindset. Get yourself on there. I believe you can sign up for free, and then there's different platforms you can go to, and there's obviously stuff that you can purchase.
And it goes out for every sport too. So that's kind of a cool thing too, because you can get your whole school involved with every sport and part of the program.
Awesome. And Shane McCall says Coach Watkins is great. So we got
I
him.
appreciate it.
Awesome. So you're on the Pittsburgh side of Pennsylvania, and so I put my 10 questions together, surrounded by that side of the state. So you ready to go?
Yeah, fire away.
All right. Pie Express or Alex's Corner?
Alex's Corner.
All right. I got Gorky's or Big Mike's?
Big Mike's.
I got Duquesne Incline or Phipps Conservative or Conservatory?
Duquesne Incline.
Yeah, I think everybody says that place must be pretty dope. Ruvos or Lucchese's?
Ruvos.
Science Center or Carnegie Museum?
I'm more into the Science Center.
Cool. Flamingos or Gillies? Agilies? Agiles? I don't know. Did I say that wrong?
Flamingos.
All right. I saw in Pittsburgh, they've got these two famous sandwich shops, Primanti's or Caution Street Deli.
Primanti Brothers, 100%.
Randall's or Benny's?
Oh, Randall's by far.
Okay, real quick before I get into these last two, Coach McCall or Shane McCall just said, what would you recommend as an every practice technique, things to do every day?
Oh, that's a good question. Camps is finishes.
I lost you for a second there.
And people are like, what? All right, can you hear me?
I can hear you. You're frozen. Yeah, I can see you now.
Okay. One thing that I focus on is finishing. I think the hardest part in folk style wrestling right now is finishing shots, especially the way scrambling has evolved and defense has gotten a lot better. If there's one thing that I think that every wrestler needs to know is how to finish a single leg on the mat. I think that's the hardest. I think that's one of the, things that has truly evolved in the sport of wrestling is finishing shots. But most importantly, a single leg. That's something that I do every day is finishing single legs. And it's something that I try to email people because there's things that I see in wrestling matches and I ask questions like, hey, why does this guy do it this way? What's the philosophy here? And there's always different philosophies in the sport of wrestling. But my philosophy is always finish, because I think finishing is the hardest thing to do, and not just in wrestling, but in life. It's easy to get. If wrestling was about just getting a leg, matches would be 100 and some to whatever. But you got to finish the shot, and defense has evolved. So you got to work on finishing. You got to focus on finishing shots. I think that's the thing that you have to focus on every day is finishing shots. I think a lot of times we spend too much time on hand fighting and setups that we got to put these kids in positions where they feel uncomfortable in practice so that they don't feel uncomfortable in the match.
Makes sense. Awesome. Shane, hope that answered your question, big guy. And hey, here's an old friend of yours, Jason Westlager. Buck and I attended the same club growing up. Shout out to All-American and Coach Waller.
Yes.
And,
so you've had him on the show, correct?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Real nice guy and real smart guy too. He helps me out sometimes. He'll send me advice on what to do with my platform and things like that. So Shout out to Coach Westlager. All right, so Speaks or the back porch?
The back porch.
And then finally, we've got Philly and Pittsburgh. So the Pittsburgh kielbasa or the Philly cheese?
Philly cheesesteak. I'm sorry. I love a Philly cheesesteak. I just, maybe that's gonna get me thrown out of the area, but that's okay.
That's okay. It's amazing.
But
Go ahead.
But what's crazy is I lived in a couple different states. Obviously, I lived in Texas, I lived in New Mexico, I lived in North Carolina. So and I've traveled a lot of places. So my idea of food has completely changed. Like I won't go eat Taco Bell no more. After living in Texas, there's very few places around this area that have like real authentic Mexican food. So it's kind of hard for me. Same way with brisket. I haven't found nobody cook a good brisket around here. So that's a little bit hard. But I see my
Like
buddies in
Texas, huh?
Texas, they always take pictures and send brisket. Yeah. Love brisket.
Yeah, there's I don't know if you remember, I know you were down here for a short time. There's a couple places, Pig Floyd's and Four Rivers and there's a
Oh, Four Rivers is really good.
yeah, some good places and yeah, they all do pretty good. Well, hey Coach, man, this has been awesome, man. You're welcome to come on anytime. And please refer anybody you'd like to see on here. And I just thank you so much. And I hope we can keep in touch.
Yes, sir. I look forward to it. You have a great day.
You too, sir. You have a great one. Thank you.
Bye-bye.